Season 7, Episode 31, number 296 of the Decoded Podcast. On ramp, talking about our pets.
Mm-hmm.
Pets and consequences. Kids' consequences.
Which ultimately comes back to, dadding. Comes back to dad. It always comes back to dad style. Dad details.
It's interesting to me when I was talking to you about the state of my house and how I feel I'm going to do something about it today because I want to. And the dadding, it reminds me of, so normally my dad default is to not be so compassionate. I think everybody in my house would agree that my default is abrasive, aggressive. But recently, my son came home from a school trip, and he wasn't feeling well. And I actually didn't flip to the default. I wasn't aggressive and abrasive. I was compassionate and empathetic. And I gotta tell you, for me at that time, as things started to settle from the afternoon into the evening, I could feel, um, um, because I didn't go default. It's funny, when I go default, at the end of it, I reflect on how I could be a little bit more compassionate, empathetic. When I went compassionate, empathetic, I felt that there was, excuse me, there was a negative residue left over during my reflection. I was like, because I think being my default allows me to be okay in a way in the end. And when I was compassionate and empathetic, I felt as though because I didn't get out what I normally get out when I'm aggressive and abrasive, it kind of was left over at the end. And I've had to do something with that. It was like nuclear waste that I didn't get rid of properly. It's like, oh shoot, I don't want to live with this. Who wants to live with this waste? So how do I deal with the waste? Just an interesting observation now that you and I kind of, the on-ramp leading to this has got me thinking about that and the dadding.
Mm-hmm.
The dadding, like I joked with you this morning, I sent my son a text and he responded to me and asked and said he thinks I'm mad. But all I was using was words, right? There was no tone, there was no other evidence except for his past experience, which is very interesting. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
tell him, no, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Um, yeah. Anyway, dadding. You had a great story. I'm not going to share it, but what I took from your story was like some of the parameters you have for yourself as you deal with dadding. To me, it feels and sounds to me like there's some protective layers there so that maybe like if I'm you, I'm thinking you built a nice little perimeter there, so maybe that nuclear waste, there is no nuclear waste that you need to dispose of because you've set a perimeter, no waste enters in a way. That's just my vibe. So I'm like, I like that because dude, how do you go dadding compassionate and empathetic, which everybody would agree is the, not everybody, most people would say that's the right thing to do as a dad.
Any of the people I like would agree.
Okay, there you go. But then at the end of it, I'm sitting in a bunch of foul waste thinking,
Mm-hmm.
uh-oh, this isn't good for me. What am I supposed to do with this?
I find that lately, when I say lately, I'll say maybe, I don't know, maybe the last 3, 4 years, I have kind of um, shifted my conversations with my kids to future facing, not anxiety style, but really, I've mentioned this too before. when I encounter or I experience something that a behavior or an action that I disagree with, that I have a disagreement with, that I sort of think is not useful, or I think that my kids are demonstrating they're not being skilled, like they're not using their skills, the things that they've learned to use. I I will I will ask them quite often, what was your plan with this? Not to not to diminish. I find stepping 1 second before the thing that I noticed, when they have the perspective take, is really useful for me. And I encourage them to be as honest as possible. Like, what was your plan? Because I said even no plan is a plan. So try and say the words. Try to put something down so I understand it. Because on the other side, there's me as dad, and when I get swept up in my dad details mind, is the assumption that I have to do it. Like, I have to take care of it. I have to fix it. I have to clean it. I have to sort of put it away. It's a parental mindset. I'll just own it. It's my dad mindset. And if I stay too long there, then I start to get a little upset and angry, because sometimes I'll land on them. Well, why is this all put on me? Why do I have to sort of why? Even staying away from the why, even asking myself the why has been very useful, because it allows me not to um, it actually allows me not to get too mired down in some of that nuclear waste. The asking what was your plan helps future actions to keep that nuclear waste from piling up. And just the what was your plan, and reminding the kids that there should always be some sort of a plan, and AKA mindful presence, thinking, intention. Like, that's what I'm talking about, the plan, right? And the honesty to sort of admit when there was none and you were just taking a shortcut, so that in the least that releases me from feeling I have to take care of it, because then it's pure dad stuff. Clean it up, take care of it. Cool. So you weren't thinking that I was going to do it. And sometimes it is revelatory. Yep, I did walk away from it, but I was just putting something in the garage or putting another thing away, and I was going to come back and do it. I'm like, okay. So then I wait and I see, okay, is this a plan that ends up becoming formalized, or is that just a quick excuse to push off the dad details, or dad swinging in with the details? So I've found that shift, that language shift, has been very useful to me. And I've started to use it with my students as well, because it has become kind of like, what the hell? What do you mean a plan? Like, I can see the look on my students' face. What do you mean the plan? But I find the plan, what was your plan, is a less problematic way to ask, why did this happen? Or why did you do that? Which sometimes can get too attached to emotional responses, or mm. So it allows me to kind of also um, mentor a kid in using your words. It's okay to say that you just didn't want to do it. It's okay to say that you wanted to go grab a snack instead. It's okay to All these things are okay to say, but it's important to say them. It's important to say them. And the last part on this is, you know, that the counseling sesh that I offered my own kid, is that every day you actually are, and this is where I come in hard as a 52-year-old, because no matter what, I'm still a 52-year-old. I've been on this planet for that many years. So you'll never, as long as I'm alive, you'll never have as much experience about being on this planet that I have. It's just chronologically impossible.
Hmm.
So I will say, and I have said, every day you are building the future version of you. The decisions that you make today affect what you do tomorrow. And us having this conversation right now is good for you, because I love you, and I love you more than the mistake that you made. So this is a good place for us to be, because other versions of this is, if I'm your boss, you're about to get fired. If I'm your spouse, you might be in trouble and about to be divorced. If I'm your friend, I may be about to say, I just can't be around you anymore. That's the sort of like the sliding doors moment of this moment. Every day you're trying, and my hope is that when they sort of think about, um, I think the reminder of how to become a better person is more powerful than telling the kid what they need to do to be a good person. I've, the emotionality of telling a kid that, my parents, in order to encourage me to be a better person, both of them used guilt and just told me constantly these invisible lists that I was on. So I was always feeling defeated, like I just never was able to sort of fulfill, because I think kids build their schema of what the world expects from them based on the closest mentors that they have. I don't think a lot of kids have this, automatic sense of, I figure, was it Cronenberg, some psych theorist. I
One of the
forget.
Bergs.
One of the Bergs, yeah. He talked about that, how we move through our sort of ethical development. And when we're really low, like a very low level ethical development, is that sort of punishment and reward. And then you move up it and you sort of get this idea that there's a global or universal type of way to operate. And we sort of flex back and forth, I think, between all those sort of schema. And I think some of it has been um, disproven across some cultures. But I do think that we grow. It's our moral ethical sort of compass kind of typically starts in a cause and effect kind of a space, and we do a one to one. I do this, so this happens. And I think eventually we get to the space was I've done a whole bunch of things, but I'm not quite sure when the effect will show. And so I think it's kind of critical. It's become critical, like I said, the last 3 or 4 years in my conversations with the kids, is just to kind of keep them forward facing away from me. You're not doing this for me. And I don't want you to do it for me anymore. I appreciate it if you're, picking up the dog crap, but it's actually not for me. And it's not for the rules that I've established or reinforced. It's about moving through this world in a good way. And in some ways, it's the exact same conversation as don't drop your garbage on the floor, right? Don't rip up other people's lawns. Like that's the kind of zone I'm trying to get them just to feel comfortable existing in, and for them to understand and accept they have the agency to navigate that space. There's no luck, there's no random. There's a decision there. There's a plan. Say the words, let's move forward.
Right on. Um, Gary's with us. Says good morning. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Gary.
And Gary knows the Berg, Kohlberg.
Yeah, moral ethical development. Kohlberg. Well done. There's our trivia for today. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate you. I like
It's,
that.
it's nice to see Gary here this morning. I was
Mhm.
talking to somebody last night who mentioned Gary's name. So
Nice.
maybe his ears were burning. I don't know. I don't know. All I heard was Gary. Gary was there. That's awesome. Oh, Gary, it's friggin' almost the end of May. One more week of May,
Hmm.
and then one more month of school,
Hmm.
and then two
Ish. There's an ish,
ish.
right? Chronologically speaking, it depends on how you're constructing your chronology of that month. I'll expand. So just this idea, I mean, if you say like, and I don't know how you're shaping it, like I don't know how that sort of looks in your sort of the palm of your hand, what your access point. For me, it feels like right now, and you and I have talked about this, it feels like very little time. Like it doesn't feel like a long time. I think part of that is that I have many things that are scheduled till
Mm,
about middle of June.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so without long stretches of openness, it feels like it's very it's there's a high sequentiality sequentiality that almost works. There's a very strong sequentiality to the next 4 weeks for me. And at that point, we get into exams in secondary. So if I make it just about work, why not? That's what we do. Um, if I make it about my teaching job, by the time I hit mid-June, there are things about the school year that are done. They're just done. And then there's a certain amount of wheel spinning staying in the school for another 2 weeks. Because once we hit exams, things change. Even though I'm in a community classroom, some of my parents, they're like, yeah, my kids aren't coming in anymore. Like they're just going to keep them home for the summer. Like, all right. I mean, and part of us, we get a little bit looser at our programming. So yeah, I would say by the middle of June, which is 3 weeks away, right? All of a sudden,
So that's an interesting perspective for sure, because in elementary, there is no loosening up, because if you do, they'll run you right over and kill you.
you're hammered to the end.
Elementary generally is. I mean,
Hmm.
there is a loosening in, so there is school, there is no exams, there is no curriculum is over. There you're with them every day from 8:30 to 3 until this year at the our last day is a PD day. So for 99% of June, the work days, everybody's in the building. And yeah, there are things happening, but when you take your foot off the gas in elementary, it looks a little bit different, because you got to do it in a way that is still, there are still milestones throughout the day to shift and transition from one thing to another. And the kids, they 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 run with the freedom if you give it to them. So
Hmm.
in my measure and in my opinion as an elementary teacher, you don't want to take your foot off the gas, but you're driving a different vehicle. You're not driving the same car that got you to June, because June's different, but there's still, it's the routine has to be there. In my opinion, if you don't have routine, you're in big trouble. It's going to be that month doubles in time, because kids are wild. Um, they need it too. They need to know. So math looks different, right? Because, well, it might not for some people. For me, it did. It was more, hey, we learned all these things. Now we're going to apply them in really different, cool ways. I'm thinking
Hmm.
my report cards are done. So I'm not going to keep torturing with, I'm going to start taking some of that math. I'm like, okay, for this week, we're building this, or we're discovering this idea. And by the end, you're going to have a product that is created with the math that we learned in December, type of thing.
Hmm.
But there's, when they're like, "Are we doing math today?" Yes. Oh, or "Are we doing this today?" Yes. And they're like, "We don't want to do that today. We're doing it today because it's on the schedule over there." How it looks is different, but we're doing it. And we are transitioning like we always do every day, because I'd like to make it to the end in one piece. Sometimes in my career, I've taken the foot off the gas on the dune buggy. Let's call it a dune buggy at the end of the year, and the kids, they want to run rampant. They want to do what they want, how they want, and I'm like, no, there's order in here, and the order will continue until the very last day. Will we have like an ice cream afternoon? Sure. Right, so that's different and it deviates, but it's still, no, we have to do this first, then the ice cream. Oh, we're in the ice cream mode. It's not a free for all. It is still going to be orderly, the way you've been taught to do it in my room all year long. It's just, and it's a mind mess, because you're like, we're gonna have ice cream and we might watch a movie, but there's a whole order to it. There's no free for all. There's no do what you like. Anyway, I get what you're saying. I'm having flashbacks of my time in the classroom with different groups and different ages. But in that elementary school, every Monday morning memo in June says the same thing from the principal: do not abandon your routines and transitions. Do
Hmm.
not maintain order. Some of the principles that are really anal will be like curriculum to the end. I'm not opposed to curriculum to the end. I'm just, we let's recognize, because some of the kids aren't stupid. They're like, dude, you finished your report cards at the beginning of June, so you're not formally evaluating and assessing me anymore, so why are you acting like you are? It's like, no, we're together till the end of this month. It's still called school. There's still learning happening. Sure, I mean, the report cards may be set in stone as far as that, what that looks like, but it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we all just throw our hands in the air and do whatever. It's just a different beast. But yeah, some principals, they know, right? They're like, okay, listen, I get it, but do not come in for 30 days or 20 days and just let them do whatever they want. That'll be disaster for you and for them, for everybody. So maintain order, continue with your routines. It looks different, you know. And then
Hmm.
it's funny, the principals that are real anal about you better not deviate. They're the ones that on a Friday with 30 minutes left at the end of the day will play music over the PA system. And all of us are looking around at each other like, what are they doing that for? Well, I'm trying to maintain order. This is the worst time of the day. And they're, come on, everybody, get up and dance. And I'm like, did you not read your own Monday morning memo? They're like 20, 30 minutes into the day. That's a lot of noise when you're in a classroom with, 25 kids who are excited and the principal has permitted them to jump for joy and dance and whatever. It's like, don't do this to me. Anyway,
That's
I'll
an
be,
interesting phenomenon. Really?
what is?
End of day dance party for the whole school?
Yeah, some principals do that. They think it's fun. They're like, let's have some fun because they're in that air conditioned office, not maintaining the logic and order and routine that I am in my classroom down the hall. They're like, let's do something fun for the kids. No, don't do it. Wait until the last 10 minutes of the day or like, or tell us you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but they're the principal. They can do whatever they want, I guess.
Hmm.
It's funny. So some of the Instagram memes that are going around about teachers is hilarious. There was one that I sent to some of my teacher friends. I don't know if I sent it to you because I know I go a little crazy with the memes, but I sent it was a funny one about principals, and my favorite is when I actually send it to principals. It makes me laugh even more. It says teachers when admin tells them not to show a movie the last week of school, and there's a guy singing, "I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway," and this is kind of what it looks like. So I sent it to like four principals, and they all wrote back like a happy face, like, "Yeah, we know you guys are showing videos, even though we tell you not to." Oh, I'll say one more thing, and I gotta be kind of secretive about it because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I worked at a school, so I'm not going to tell you when or whatever. I was in a school and I was helping out, and the Monday morning memo said, um, the superintendent is coming on this day, and the time the superintendent was going to be there was over lunch. And the administrator said in the memo, a reminder, we do not show videos during lunchtime. Students are to be eating their lunch and talking to their friends around them. So in my board, lots of people will put something on the bright link screen during lunchtime, so while kids are eating they can watch an episode of a TV show or cartoon or something, just so it's not crazy loud and everything's kind of orderly. Well, we've been told, a superintendent or two have told the system, we're not doing that anymore. Kids should be socializing during lunchtime. Okay. But when I started helping out at this school, I was very confused because every day at lunch, everybody was showing videos. And then I see in this memo, remember, we don't do this here at lunch. So then I was with some staff members that are full timers there, and I'm like, I, I got to, I need your help. They're like, what's wrong? I'm like, you guys have all been here for years. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, I got here, and since I've been here every day at lunch, this is the practice I see. Now I'm reading in the Monday morning memo that for this week on this day, the superintendent's coming, and there's a reminder that we don't do this here, but we've been doing this here ever since I walked in the building. They're like, that's just for that day. That's just for that day. And they're like, some people probably still will show videos even on that day. And the principal has told them, we don't do this here. Oh, and by the way, the superintendent's going to be here from 11:30 to 1. Like if you put it together, which most people can do, I think, you don't show a video that day. But it
Hmm,
was
that's
just funny
awesome.
because I was laughing because I was like, oh, so they're like, we all show videos at lunch. They know we do. That day we probably shouldn't because the superintendent's coming, and that's the superintendent that made up this rule for the whole system. I'm just so it's funny. I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway, and I'm sending it to principals who are sending back big smiley faces. It's funny. It's funny, and I'm not in a classroom causing problems, so nobody can say to me, "Roland's a problem," right? Because I'm not right now. So anyway, there you go.
I don't have I don't have those feeds anymore. I don't have any feeds where I'm getting or sharing teacher memes. I don't even think I ever share them with you. Like, I honestly don't think.
They're lowbrow, simple
Hmm.
humor in my, but they still, some of them are really friggin' funny.
I I don't know how I've fallen out of that. I'm assuming some of them still pop up in my feed. Maybe they don't. Maybe I've actually managed to, like, keep them from really being a part of my feed. I don't know.
This morning I got one from a principal, and it says, "Teachers in June, just keep going with the flow." And it's a little boat, and it's in the water, and a wave hits it and destroys the boat. And
Mhm.
it's like, just go with the flow. It doesn't matter what happens. And I'm like, this is awesome that a principal sent me this. So very aware of what the month of June can look like. And teachers are done, man. Like, even before COVID and the nonsense that seems to exist in our schools these days, June is an exhausting month. They
Mm.
all are, but June hits different because I think you can feel and see the end, the temperature changes. And I've worked in schools where there's no air conditioning, so you're in a sweltering room all day trying to maintain the order, trying to continue with the routines. Everybody's sweating their guts out. I remember one school I worked at, dude, 15 minutes into the day, my shirt was already soaked, and I just resigned myself to the idea that at this school for these months, I will make sure I'm showered and clean when I get there, but then I'm just living in sweat and heat and humidity for the rest of this day. And I just told myself, this is just the way here. This is just the way. So 15 minutes in, you're sweating buckets already. Craziness.
Yeah, it's I like that you said that because I disagree. I like it when I disagree with you sometimes. I like the feeling. I don't find June any more stressful than September, than December, than November. I really don't. I
And
don't have
knowing
any.
you, I would say that's cool, but for
Mhm.
me and others, it hits different.
But here's the thing, I wanna meet the others that think like me, because there's a whole lot of you.
I
There's a
don't, yeah,
whole
I was
lot.
gonna say, I don't, maybe you're the ones I don't connect with in buildings for whatever reason.
But I
I don't
see
know
all
why.
of you. I think there actually is a scarcity issue, because I encounter more people with your mindset than mine. I really do. It's a funny it's sorry, it's not funny. It's and I don't even know I'll pull back from that because I do understand at a very simple, basic level that everyone's experience in school is subjective.
Mm,
Completely. And that in order for me to listen and hear and just kind of appreciate everyone's experience, I have to raise my objectivity here. I have to raise it just to be able to sort of like say, okay, my view is entirely inward looking on this. One of a very consistent experience, though, is that I would actually venture to say that of the if I would say if I had 100 conversations, just to get a sample size, if I have a conversations about what June is like, 95% of them, I'll go 95% of them are, I just got to F and hold on to the end. And okay, I'll just say okay. But I don't encounter many people that are openly saying, "Nah, June's fine. I really don't care about the heat. Yeah, okay, air conditioners work." Like, there's again, just I don't know. I don't know how it just slides for me. I don't know. I really don't know. Am I aware of deadlines and things that have to be done? Yeah, but I feel like I have those every month. Maybe it does kind of come back to part of my mindset. I will say part of it is my stoicism. I will say part of it is stoicism. I'm going to say thank you, stoicism. But I will also say there's this other idea that um, because I also don't have an automaticity to thank God it's the weekend, which is a smaller version of thank God it's the end of June. And I do understand that you can have months, years, several years of having classes that you don't connect with. Having a portfolio that you don't connect with, having colleagues that you don't connect with. I do understand all that. I just in this moment, you got me a little bit mind blown that Gen no, very specifically speaking for me, 95% of the conversations that I encounter about the end of the year start with something of the flavor, "Thank God the school year's almost over." Yeah, I feel like an alien sometimes because I listen, I'm like, "Yeah, I don't, sometimes it's not even that I don't disagree, I'm just completely detached, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not having those feelings at all. I'm gonna go back to work, I'm gonna go back to my" and then the list that I go back to seems to be part of the exact same list that they're saying is completely stressing them out. So in some ways, we're going back to the same context and work. I'm just kinda going back with one foot in front of another, get it done. I'm gonna have some days where I have to do more work for the government and less work for me. And then I'm gonna have some days of the week where I get more work for me and I don't have to do stuff for the government. Maybe it's more for my family. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I say the government, any of our listeners, I'm just mean like public education, right? Maybe it comes down to some days I'll have more time to work for me, and then others I'll have to be doing more work for other people. So
Right. Well, this is good that you feel like an alien because you're in a different realm. You're feeling different things. It's good. You're not just going with the flow of what's happening around you because that's important. Because people can get swept away with everybody else who's moving in that direction. I've been on both sides, right? Like I've been in the classroom thinking, God, this month's got to come to an end. I want my summer now. And as you know, for the last 2.5 years, it's not been like that at all. I've been like, this is great. Even when there have been years as a classroom teacher where I get to June and I'm like, God, I wish I had more time with these kids. So I've been in the classroom and experienced the, oh my God, we're in June. I can't wait for this to end. And I've been in a classroom and it's been June. I'm like, oh my God, this sucks that it's coming to an end. I wish I could spend more time and not more time like, oh, I didn't get my curriculum done. No, more time like these kids are fantastic and they're now starting to apply many of the things they've learned in different ways for different reasons based on their interests. So it's like the most beautiful thing a classroom teacher in elementary can see, in my opinion. And it's like, oh, I'm only going to have a month of this. Like, I don't like that. And I've also lived for the weekends and I've lived for, okay, it's Saturday. That's cool. Like it's no, I'm not like living for the weekend. So I've been on both sides of that. And I got to tell you, for me, it's about my context and it's about, I guess, the people around me. And I don't know what happens to me in those times. Um, and I think now I've come to a place where I need to honor me. So if that means that on a Thursday, I'm like, God damn, I can't wait for this week to end. Maybe dig a little bit deeper and just honor me and not be like, oh, I shouldn't. No, I should do whatever I should do. And if I feel for whatever reason discomfort that wants me to escape to a weekend, then that's maybe I investigate what's going on that leads to that. And even when I don't feel like, oh, it's Friday already, I should investigate what made time hit me across the head where I didn't even know it was passing. So I need to honor me at the end of all those things instead of thinking about, well, Chris operates this way. Why can't I be more like Chris? No, Chris is going to do what Chris is going to do. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'd like to be more aware of why I'm doing it. And then if there is discomfort, Where's it coming from? And is there anything I can do to alleviate it? Or is it just discomfort that needs to occur? And then if there is no discomfort, then what's happening that things are just kind of rolling smooth? So that's where I land for that because I know I've had both. I've had both. Current in my current role with my current situation, I'm kind of looking forward to the end of this school year. Uh, just because it means it's over, and for us teachers, it means that in September, it's it's different. It's the same, but it's different. It's not like a 9 to 5 where you go in and it's the same people, it's the same stuff all the time. There's a closing that comes at the end of June, and then when September starts, there's for me, there's a newness, new people, new kids, new routines. Um, and I'm looking forward to the new, and I'm looking forward to having this chapter of my professional life come to an end in some ways. So it's funny, even in my situation, I don't want, like, I'm not looking for time to pass. I'm not wishing I could skip a month of my life. I'm just like, yeah, at this moment, I see a light at the end of the tunnel and it equals the end of this school year. Um, and that's me right now. So I'm gonna honor that. Jer-
I've never wanted more time. I've never come to June and thought to myself, "Oh man, I'm really loving what I'm doing with the kids right now. I just wish," or "Oh man, I haven't covered what I want to do with the kids right now." I have never, dude, I'm just not. I'm like, I just detach. I'm like, this is our end. June is our end. And everybody has their own clock ticking on, the June, what, the actual time in June where they're going to check out. The system can tell us you have to stay focused and on your A game until the end, but that doesn't happen either. It just doesn't. um so yeah, I love hearing some of this stuff that you're saying, because it's just like it's not has not been my experience. And again, even when you said that, you dropped that big saying about, like, there was a little it what I took from it is a little bit of that giddiness. What is it like, again, where I feel like an alien, the teachers that are just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss the kids so much." I'm like, I'm not, but I'm not saying it in a way. I'm not, it may sound, if I think if it sounds hurtful, then that's a problem with the person hearing me saying those words, because it's not hurtful. It's part of it is I recognize my place within this universe of this child, and I miss my own family when I'm not around them. I don't miss other people's families. I don't miss other people's kids. Do I enjoy? I work constantly to have a good working relationship, both with my colleagues, my families, and with my neighbors. But I don't. I'm always cautious about over emoting that connection. I don't, I save that. I protect that. I treasure that and try and feed it back to my own family. And I do think there's a cost there. Anybody that comes home feeling like they've taken an emotional toll and they just can't be there with their family, I would argue is investing too much emotion in their work and needs to seek help to sort of help manage that, to get to just some detachment. Like, if you are, I get it. You can have, and there's a lot of reasons why you can feel depleted at the end of the week. But if you consistently do, then I would say that you don't have a way to have healthy detachment from your work. It can be physical detachment too, as in the work just is constant. But even that, I mean, the emotional part is what you might notice first, because you're yelling at your spouse or you're getting frustrated with your kids without any on ramp. You're just suddenly there, and you realize what they're doing is a continuation of what you suffered through at work. Like, it's just the next step. There was no pause there. There was no, not pause. There was no stopping point and like, that's work. This is now. You're not able to say, I'm a laborer. I'm a teacher here. I'm an adult parent here. Like, you don't have transition, right? So I love this. I love this. What's Gary saying? June doesn't cause me any other stress or anxiety.
Gary also said that if there's any stretch that may feel a little heavier or that the atmosphere of the school feels different, it would be November.
Hmm.
Give us
Okay.
more on that, Gary. Tell us
Yeah.
more if you want on why November. Now, Gary's a high school teacher, So I'd like to know more about that, the high school environment he's in, and what it is about November.
I'd
Um,
also like to know how actively he's employing skills to create equilibrium. That's always more fascinating to me. Like what is Gary actively doing so that isn't a ethereal, that's just the way years are kind of a thing. There's sort of active state to keep the balance, right? I'll assume balance, that there's certain sort of work being done there to keep it like that, and it's not just June. I will say, and again, I will own it, I take intentional steps to maintain professional detachment, still emotional integrity, but I do decide how far. I do quickly realize where it's tipped from what my mentorship is entirely drawing emotions out of me, and the actual moment isn't benefiting from it. So I need to be able to step back. I told you about this, and I know for damn sure you've experienced this. Back when I was doing the access expulsion program, we had to do intakes, and I always was mind blown at how quickly and sometimes confusingly problematic being at the family's kitchen table can be. And I use that phrase at the kitchen table as in where all of a sudden you feel like you walked in, you had a professional decorum, and all of a sudden you're like sitting with them in their house and you're actually in your office. But whatever's playing out, the behaviors, the informality, the information, the stories, the hugs, whatever is coming at you, noticing that you're at the kitchen, at the students or the family's kitchen table. We noticed this during COVID teaching as well. The moment that you assume that you are at that table with them, it can be very useful if if it's still building towards a goal and a useful outcome for the kid. But if you've just been subsumed into the family unit and now you are actually ineffective because you're not seen as a professional in that sort of role, then that becomes problematic for me. So I do things intentionally to interrupt the emotional fabric of my relationships with both the parents and the kids, not to destroy it, but to sort of say we need to kind of like do a little seam repair and kind of stitch it a different way because we need to redirect where we're going. So, um, and those tactics we don't talk a lot about in school because again, it comes back to like, I think the going conversation is that, or the more comfortable conversation is that people want to talk about missing their kids. They want to talk about missed opportunity. They actually don't want to talk about fulfillment and no, this is the end of a cycle and cycles are important. And we'll be back in September to try something else. But I'm not even going to talk about that now because tomorrow's a day that I have other things I have to get done.
I get it, man. Comes back with, he thinks that it's that November daily light change, midterm reporting, and first long stretch without a break.
Hmm.
And so I'd like to hear more from Chris. I'm sure you got stuff to say about this idea as well, that the stretches where we don't have breaks and there are a couple more extra things on the plate, many people tend to get themselves into feeling like, oh boy, this is going to be a tough one before it's even started, because they have to manage, they have, in my opinion, they have to shift their time a little bit more for the government than maybe with their family. Um, those breaks are great, psychologically, to know, oh, okay, in 2 weeks we're going to have a day, whether it's a day off, like a holiday, or whether it's a PD day where you know that you can wake up that morning, roll into school a little bit different because you're not prepping and planning lessons that you're going to deliver, but you're going to be sitting with your colleagues and you're going to be listening to somebody provide you with information or collaboratively work with your team to plan something for the future. I know from a psychological perspective, we, the people, can get ourselves into positions of thinking a certain way. And so this is cool to me because um, I'm gonna aim, to reflect more on those times. I gotta tell you though, those times don't tend to bother me as much as the other people around me because I'm an early starter. So when I'll be writing I'll be writing reports weeks before other people start because I like a slow release. So I like when we hit what would be typically a high stress time for many teachers, I'm not at that stress level because I started 2.5 weeks earlier to ensure that I could be more level than go really high and really low all the time. That's just me in my teaching career. This is how I've operated with every time somebody says this report is due on this day. I'm like, awesome. I'm going to add 3 weeks to that timeline so that I don't have very high highs and very low lows. And when everybody's stressed out of their mind and my kids got crazy hockey schedule, I'm okay because I've already built it in and I've already baked some of that work. You get what I mean? Like
Mhm,
I've really looked my vision there is really extreme. Other people say you're crazy and I'm like, okay. And I think you're crazy for leaving it till for a 3 week window when you're okay with high stress every day for 3 weeks. I think that's crazy. But we're all allowed to have our perspective. So that's cool, Gary. I like to build in. I like to build in.
so what is it that you want my perspective on? What's the thing that you were
Oh,
sort of
sorry.
yeah.
I can't remember. It had to do with the idea of what's your perspective on Gary's perspective that November is more of a month that is stress inducing because of the daily light change, midterm reporting, and a long stretch with no break. Now, before you
Mm,
answer, Gary says to adapt and prevent feeling overwhelmed. He attempts to be in the moment and to focus on the things in front of him. School doesn't seem to evoke extreme responses.
I always exist that in this frame that school is one part of my life, not my life.
Mm,
So that's where I kind of start. So what that actually allows me access to is that no matter the stress that someone's putting upon me, I can say it ain't happening. It ain't happening. And it's that access to no, saying no that's been very useful in my career. And not only the sort of this access, like just this general access to know this skill set, also the realizing that um I have the flexibility to say yes later if the opportunity still presents, or later if it's the next year. I'm always cautious about what people tell me I need to do as professional development. I'm always cautious of who's telling me that I need to do for professional development because I have had people say, well, if you just do X a little bit earlier, or you just start this such a thing a little bit sooner. And so I cautiously listen to that. Um, I will steal from something that I learned when my spouse was pregnant. The people that would willingly come up and give you advice on how to do pregnancy, and the general discomfort that creates when people openly offer advice on how to just sort of gestate better. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the advice. I appreciate our conversation. I'll take it into consideration and move on. And steal that and move on. It's funny. I recognize that there's a whole lot of factors that can create that tension in November, sure. But I could sort of pick out monthly a list that sort of creates this perfect storm for people to get lit up about. We could talk about EQAO, we could talk about midterms, we could talk about prom week, we could talk about different religious or cultural holiday seasons, we could talk about geopolitical events. What I love is that if I accept the fact that school is just one part of my life, then I feel like I have a little better structure to sort of calm down and say, I get that this is something that's expected to be delivered, but it's not me. It's not what's actually happening. What's happening around me is not happening inside of me. So this idea that the time change, okay, but if I'm not actually feeling it, I'm also going to say to someone, yeah, I'm not feeling it. Like I'll admit it. I'll admit, like, yeah, this is not stressful for me. happy to talk about it, but no, this is not stressful for me. Sometimes people are like, what do you mean? Like, how can it not be? I'm like, well, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about how it's not stressful for me. Because I do always appreciate those opportunities to kind of talk out strategy, like strategies for life. You and I have spent a decade now almost talking about this, like how to be better dads, better humans, better spouses, better teachers, better sort of keepers of the planet. Actually, we haven't done so much of that, but I think there's an assumption, and if we can make those other spheres work well, then we're doing a good job in keeping the planet in good shape too. Maybe season 8 becomes our eco season. How are we giving back? How are we actually looking to see how you and I have had now 7 years of professional growth through this podcast? Where do we think we've actually had positive impact out in the world? Or not? We can just keep talking teacher and dad talk. I don't feel November any more than any other month. I always choose I try my best to choose um, from the salad of emotional things that could be happening in the day. I try to get to the 10,000 feet and choose which ones I'm going to actually, you know, allow to stay in, dispense with the things that I can't actually do anything about, and hope that when the next thing is presented to me, if it comes back around, that I have the skills to deal, and maybe I can help a person or two with it.
Speaking of 10,000 feet, there's a teacher that Gary works with, and I'm not going to name names, but this something this teacher said to me a couple of years ago still cracks me up. And when I bring it up with that teacher, we both laugh. The teacher, something was going on maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. There was like lots of stuff in the news about race wars and stuff like that, like really big things that impact people in their day-to-day lives as they think about what's happening in the world and how we're not getting along and things like this. And this teacher was one day talking to me about this level of this level of conflict between people about the color of our skin and our cultures and our what makes us different.
Mhm.
And then the next day I see this teacher and he's like, yeah, this kid came to me crying yesterday. She was worried about her trigonometry test, and he said something to her like, you're crying over a trigonometry test and we've got race wars going on all over the world. Like he was trying his 10,000 feet was kind of delivered to her as in, just breathe for God's sake. Like, you'll get through trigonometry. Take some deep breaths. What exactly is the problem with the math that you don't understand? What's making you so emotional? So it was just funny that him being up here and her being here, he had to come down to her and basically say, let's take care of you here so you're feeling okay at 10 feet. And now come for a ride with me to 10,000 and let me know how it makes you feel. And in his reporting to me, she was able to calm herself and to see the bigger picture, right? And his purpose to her was, there are issues everywhere. So what we have to do is we have to find ways to work through them and work through the ones that are close to us a little bit deeper than the ones that are farther away from us. Anyway, it was just funny. So now we laugh. We joke like, if we see something on the news that we discuss, we joke about, but what about that trigonometry test? And maybe we shouldn't joke, because at that time for that person, that was a real emotional experience. And there's importance placed, there was importance placed on that test for that student for a number of different reasons. I like that he helped her just slow down, take some breaths. You haven't even written it yet. So it's like, let's just focus on preparing for it. And then let's look at the results. And then you can feel some emotions then, and we can work through that too. Trigonometry test versus race wars, 10,000 feet. Man, when you get that perspective, it can do wonders. It really can, when you pull back and you look at everything. Because when you do that, when I do that, obviously certain issues that are really big when I'm close to them become smaller. And then some of the small things that I see from 10,000 feet, I think those are the things that are supposed to be bigger to me, right? And it's like, okay, it just helps me with perspective and understanding where things are located in my life, where I think I should have close proximity and where I should not have close proximity. And then it's a good reset for me. I come back down a little bit. And then I remember, don't forget to go back up to 10,000 feet if you need to. It's there, right? The only thing stopping me is my mindset from going up there to gain a different perspective, maybe a better perspective.
Yep, I would agree. And one of those lovely, great things about that, that's the only thing that's stopping you. Others may see that there's more to it than that. I love that you can get there, Chids, but yeah, not so much. I can't get there. You had me thinking about something. It's probably good. It's gone. It's gone. That's okay.
It might come back later.
It might. It might. So, as we approach the end of the school year, I remember what I was going to say. Yeah, I would never tell the student, yeah, you're going to make it through it. I just wouldn't. I don't, because part of it is I'm so CBT in my mindset that I will only, in those moments where I'm sort of, where I've kind of been chosen to sort of be a part of an emotional space with a kid, I try and go completely evidence based, compassionate, but evidence based. What's the evidence in front of you? So I just bring the lens so close to the moment. Sometimes the kid wants a blowout, as in they want to try and get to that 10,000 feet, but to suggest at that moment that you're going to make it through it, that's a 10,000 foot perspective that's going to make them feel like could make them feel like they're leading off the CN Tower. So I just bring the lens right downtown, right beside them and say, okay, like, what's the next step we can take? What's the next step you will take? So I try and make those two things. So I'll stay in it with you as long as I'm useful, but someone else may have to take over. And I try and make that very, very small and slow it down for the kid, just to slow it down. If I say you'll make it through it, I think that speeds it up, especially if the point that they perceive they have to be through it is in 20 minutes, 20 minutes from now, because they have their exam to write. Like, you've just gone from, okay, I got you, to here you go, boink. So yeah, just how I would do the words. But for me, like, those words, the method with the words is very important. Very important. The delivery system for the words, very important. The sort of like psych behind the words, very important. And it's a bit of a mind game, but that's how I sort of choose to roll in those moments.
Mm-hmm. I think when you say that, for me, it's important for me to define what does it mean making it through it, right? Like, the test isn't gonna, life is not gonna end after the test. Now, whether they do well on the test or not do well on the test, that's a whole different thing to me. But the test is one point of a million other points that they're going to experience in their lifetime. And I can understand the power and that moment. That moment is huge for them. And you and I and Gary and whoever else is listening has been through thousands of tests. And here we're still sitting here talking on the Decoded podcast or listening to the Decoded podcast. So for me, that's what getting through it means for me. It's just a point, and whether you do well or not, it is a point in your life and your experience. But at that time, you're right. I like your analogy of they could be standing on the CN Tower on the ledge and they could fall over. And you don't want that, because that's going to probably cause more harm than good, I would say. But that's just me. Gary says, to adapt and prevent feeling overwhelmed, I attempt to just be in the moment and focus on the things in front of me. School doesn't seem to evoke extreme responses. I may have already put this up there, but that's good, Gary. That's good that that works for you, right? That's, sometimes I feel very selfish when people around me are losing their minds. And they're like, why aren't you? And I'm like, because I have a process to try to avoid what's happening to you right now. I'm not saying it never happens to me. It does. But, for certain things, report cards, IEPs, um, other types of things that have to be done by a certain timeline, or else it's going to affect a lot of other people. I try to, I have built a process that I experience in order to avoid having emotional difficulties at that time. I do my best because I know other things pop up. Other things pop up that will throw me off. I'm like, oh, shoot, I kind of feel like shit right now. Why is that? Oh, because I'm not in the moment, or I don't have a process to work through this in a way that works for me. But then it's like, okay, what's in front of you now? What do you need to build? And that brings me some peace. I like peace as much as I can have it, and I understand that's not how I understand there's no rule in the universe that says Roland gets his peace just because he wants it or thinks he's planned for it.
So important. So important. The universe is not obligated to make you happy.
No.
So you take that agency back. And I'm not saying that makes it any easier or it makes you any happier necessarily, but choice and your ability to change your mind are human superpowers. And we know when we think we don't have choice, and when we feel like we can't change our mind, like you only have to put a couple more sort of um, bricks on that wall to sort of make it feel like you're just out of control, right? You haven't slept. If you're, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, or financial things, or you had to fight, like the idea that you can't choose and you can't stop is like that's a heady mix. And any
Um,
job provides that experience and that learning. Any job, there is no existence. If we go Buddhist, Buddhism here, there is no existence without suffering. There is no such thing. Suffering is a part of life. It's just, there's always something. There's something you're going to disagree with. There's something you don't want. There's something that's not exactly how you like it. Da, 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 da. So there's no escape from this. But how we navigate it, I think there's always interesting flexibility in there, and also critical. If I think one of the things fundamentally, so if there's moments in the school year that stress you out, my hope is that you've actually got a posse of people, a toolkit of resources, and that allow you to navigate that. Because the only thing worse, I would say, than sort of being able to say that November is terrible is to accept that every November has to be terrible. Like that's so much more problematic, right? This time of year is like whatever that is, like my God, because that means that not only do you have that dark time around it, you create an anniversary time on it, which means there's so much more that happens. As soon as you create an anniversary date around an event, the expectations and the emotions multiply. Just they become exponential. Then you also have by anniversary dating something, then you have the on ramp. Then you have the deflation on the other side of like, we made it past it again. Yeah, or like, or like, oh, we made it. I need a hug, right? So I understand that for some people, I've told you I like anarchy. Me back in the day, um, I do like anarchy. I think what I like about anarchy is how it reminds me of how to navigate the world. That's what I like about anarchy. I think anarchy, when I say anarchy, it's just because I recognize that to live is to suffer, and the world is under no obligation to make you happy. So those challenges in my mind are constantly moving through my day. How do I make myself happier? How do I give myself more? How do I make sure that I have a balance of time for me so I don't feel like I'm just giving it to my job? And how am I improving so that my family improves? I kind of backtrack it right to there every time. So, meh.
an alien. Okay. A green one too.
I was using my Posca markers. Hey, can I drop a thing? I got a bust soon.
Yes.
Two things. Posca markers are really cool. They're paint markers. They're cool to play with. I don't play with them that much, but I looked over at them on my desk. I'm like, I could use those to make an alien. Second thing, I just want to throw some props out to Mel White, who dropped a piece. She posted up a piece. She posted up a piece. You say something just while I look for this
Oh,
piece.
I'm fascinated and intrigued by what you're going to say about Mel White because I didn't know this was coming. So I haven't heard Mel White's name in a while.
Yeah.
She's an
Um,
educator out of Ottawa. She may be retired now. I'm not 100% sure.
Mel White is retired. She's a
Okay.
retired high school English
Okay.
teacher. Okay, so I'm just going to her piece. I love this. Okay, so she dropped a piece this week. She dropped a piece this week on her is reflecting is her WordPress site. Musings
Is
about life is underscore reflecting. So it's like Mel White is reflecting. She used to have it used to be called In a White Room,
okay.
and but I think she's just flipped her blog to basically what retirement looks like. So this recent piece is called Collecting, and there's an image that she's posted up that says it's a piece of paper, a note. On the note, it is written in scratchy, very scratchy kind of handwriting, phone doc office, 6th March. And then it has a phone number, and it has the doctor's name, and the paper looks like it's been in a pocket or kind of crumpled. And so last week I mentioned our dad shoes, and I
Mhm.
put out to Insta, like, if anybody chooses to kind of post stuff up to that, just celebration of dads, fatherhood, dudes, the people that are aspiring to be dads, whatever, however people want to kind of connect with that. But it is as the lead up to Father's Day. And so she tagged, this is one of the tags, one of the only tags so far that popped up on that. So her piece is called Collecting. So this is what she wrote. I am collecting daily unsubstantial artifacts as proof of life, knowing these are connections, the few final scratches, quivering lines, attempting to shape the numbers and letters of memory. Scraps of paper once tossed as meaningless, now saved, value appreciating with scarcity and impending end. So Mel has shared in some bits and pieces just stuff that's going on in her family. The fact that she has tagged this to our dad shoes, I will make the leap that it has to do with some person in her world that is repping the dad style. But I just thought, whoa, like that hits me hard. I've written a couple pieces about individuals that I observe that keep things like memory keepers about, from individuals that are no longer with them. Um, but yeah, I want to share it. So Mel White is right now, she's still, caring for her family, taking care of her family stuff. She's still doing literary things. She's running writing groups, literary writing groups. And I think out of a local bookstore in Ottawa. She's located in Ottawa. So I've been digging what her next step is after she's decided to retire from high school. So I encourage anyone to check her out. In a White Room, Melanie White, Ottawa, used to be part of Ottawa, I believe, District School Board. And she's running writing sessions. Very talented, very caring, compassionate, fascinating individual, and definitely there's depth there that just that I mentioned to her on there. I'm like, I want to drop a comment, but this is echoing way, it's just bouncing around your piece about, like, I'm having too big of memories to deal with right now about my own grandfather, my father. So good stuff. Good stuff. Our dad shoes, Melanie White.
Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Gary and whoever else was here and who is here now watching us, thanks. Have an awesome weekend, and we'll catch you later. This was season 7, episode 31, number 296 of the Decoded Podcast. Peace.
Peace, buddy.